for a very long time, even during the pandemic when everybody was on their knees. So whether it was them selling off gas storage facilities, scrapping investment in renewables, or failing to insulate our homes, we need to be really clear about whose fault this is. Now, in these 12 years of failing pay and failing to increase taxes on the rich and failing to implement and giving more tax cuts to their mates and ring-fencing profits for their rich mates, and of course the absolute decimation of our public services, we've only seen things worsen. And those things did accelerate during the pandemic, but it wasn't just because of that. Now, in this area, we've seen food bank usage go up by 15% since the start of the pandemic, and that is an absolute disgrace. My family are from Ghana, in West Africa, in the global south, and having to explain to my cousins about what we have in this country in terms of food banks is something that they cannot believe. They don't understand why a country like this, working people even, would have to go somewhere to get food to feed their families. It makes no sense. Now, there may be really subtle shifts here and there, but the consistent direction of travel has been a government for the rich at the expense of the rest of us. And we may have said goodbye to Boris Johnson, or hasta la vista. Could you imagine he actually thinks he may be coming back? But all of the signs when it comes to looking at Liz Truss in Downing Street just mean more of the same, and if not an intensification of Tory policies. They're not going to let this go. And Tory members, I think 0.0 something percent of them have managed to elect the only person that was possibly less capable than Boris Johnson of running this country. But just like all of her political leaders before in terms of the Conservatives, Liz Truss's political instinct is clearly to saddle cash-strapped households with even more debt, cut taxes and public services, rather than using the vast shoulders of fossil fuel companies and the super rich to bear the costs of fossil fuel inflation. And so we do need to be really clear that the inflationary crisis we're experiencing is not being exacerbated by wage crisis. How can it be when average wages have fallen by 3% and UK workers have seen the biggest drop in their spending power in more than 20 years? And that's according to the government's own data. Now, we can't allow them to try and fool us or anybody else into the idea that higher pay for workers is somehow going to worsen the economy or make inflation worse. How is it that the bosses can demand more pay and the shareholders can demand more money, but the people that keep this country running should just be, happy with their lot in life? That's an absolute disgrace. And all of this is being made worse, of course, by the UK's craven dependency on dirty and dangerous fossil fuels. We're seeing BP, Chevron, ExxonMobil and Shell reporting obscene profits of 22 billion in the first 3 months of the year, just the first 3 months. But instead of taxing these obscene fossil fuels and profits on them to deliver a genuine energy bill freeze, it seems the government now want to write them a blank cheque for energy companies and force households to fund this for years to come, whether by levying this through taxation or whacking it back onto bills. Now, we need to be clear that these corporations, bosses, executive bankers and landlords are the only one that should be taking a pay cut right now. And by that I mean not increasing people's wages a little bit when we know that it's a real terms pay cut. They should be taking a full-on pay cut. Now, it's been really inspiring, I think, definitely over the past couple of years, to see an emboldened trade union movement coming out for the hot strike summer and refusing to accept any more pay cuts for workers, and we need to be supporting our trade unions all the way. There's nothing that makes me more sick when you hear about how trade unions are discussed in the media or discussed in some circles as if they are some sort of separate group. The trade unions and the members of the trade unions are the people of this country, and they should be respected as such. I've been really proud to stand in solidarity with all our trade unionists on various picket lines, showing us the best way to organise and fight back against the Tories. And it's important to say that when trade unions fight and win, working class people win. From weekend to holiday pay and health and safety laws, trade unions didn't win the rights we have today by asking nicely. They won them by building a movement that governments and bosses couldn't ignore. So if your pay isn't keeping in pace with inflation, join a union and do exactly the same. And when trade unions come on strike, even though it is partly about their own pay and their own conditions, because everybody does deserve a fair pay rise, the things that affect these workers often have a knock-on impact on the delivery of all of those services. So, in that sense, trade unions aren't just fighting for a future for their own members, they're fighting for a future for all of the things that we rely on, all of our public services, transport, postal services, the criminal justice system, and on our NHS. They want these things to be better for all of us, and that's why they're calling for a lot of these things. So it's not a selfish demand, as some would have you believe. Now, when the Tories have already rolled back on our right to protest and are threatening further attacks on trade union rights, it's important that we stand up for them. And so I've been really glad to see the emergence of social movements like Enough is Enough and Don't Pay, filling that vacuum and making sure that it's clear that the large numbers of people in this country stand up for our trade unions. And I think we need to be even more clear that the threat of mass non-payment is one of the only reasons why Liz Truss is having to do what she's doing on energy bills at the moment. But it's not even clear just how much of an impact that's going to have. Ultimately, we need to take these public services, including energy, back into public ownership. That is the only way we can guarantee that it will be put forward. Because think about it, if people just want to make profits of these things, of course they're going to cut corners, of course they're not going to invest in infrastructure, of course it's going to end up being worse for all of us. These things need to benefit us and us alone, and that's why they need to be in public ownership. So most of all, I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and listening to push all of these things in this local community in particular right now, because there's a massive struggle in Parliament at the moment. God knows what they're going to bring actually we do know, they're going to try and take away the Human Rights Act, but God knows what they're going to try after that, especially after the past few years. So the things I think we need to be pushing for, and you've probably heard as many of them before from fantastic speakers, action on energy bills, government action on energy bills, funded off the back of those who can actually afford to pay, not those who can't afford to pay. And instead of letting prices rise to protect energy company profits, we should cap bills at last month's levels and let energy firms absorb these costs. If they go bust, then we take them into public ownership, which we should be doing. Public ownership, again, if I hadn't said it enough times before, and a proper windfall tax. Now, when I talk about a windfall tax, it's not an either-or thing. It's not a windfall tax or public ownership. A windfall tax is to deal with the insane amount of profits they have made now, and to distribute that equally and make sure that people aren't paying more. But ultimately, we do need to go into public ownership. Taxing the rich. We were told that this wasn't really one of the good policies from the last Labour Party manifesto, but I think it was quite popular. Now we have to raise those profits raise the profits raise taxes rather on corporate profits and the top 5% of earners. They earn an insane amount of money. We need to close all of those tax dodging loopholes, abolish non-dom status, which we found that many of my colleagues had for a long time, increase capital gains tax, and introduce new taxes on speculation. Overall, Britain needs a pay rise, absolutely. And it's so disgusting when you talk about pay rises in Parliament. Some of the things that the Tories opposite say, and some of them think they're really, really clever. And I think to myself, think about how you got where you are. And they keep talking about low-skilled work. And I'd like to say again and again, there is no such thing as low-skilled work. There's just low-paid work. Everybody's work, no matter what it may be, is skilled if it is done well, and that is all the workers of this country want to do. They're not lazy, as Liz Truss and some of her mates might want to say. So we need to fight for that £15 an hour, not by 2030, but by right now, because that's what we need. You need to join a trade union if you haven't already, again, but I'm sure you all have because you're all very good people and you've come here this evening. You need to get out on the picket lines when you can. And tackling food poverty is so key. Again, when I hear some of the stories that some of my constituents come to me with, again, you couldn't understand that it was happening in a country like this. And when we're looking at tackling this type of poverty, we need to tackle the root causes of poverty. So I'm really pleased to support the Right to Food campaign that's being led in Parliament by my fantastic colleague Ian Byrne MP, and hearing more about the Right to Food campaign here. And housing, there's nothing I receive more things in my inbox about than housing. We need to freeze rents, and we need to cap rents. And we need to build more council homes. I mean, you see so many different developments going around this area, and people keep asking why people don't have anywhere to live, why they're on this register, why they're constantly bidding when people are building more houses, but they're building it for the rich, and that's not what we should be doing. We should be building houses for people in this community, insulating homes, and introducing a charter for renters' rights. And I'm going to end on this because I know I've gone on just a little bit. And I would say this, but I want you to stay with me here. Anybody here that has left the Labour Party, I need you to rejoin. And I can hear some murmurings there, because what you need to... Thank you. Because I know that things haven't been easy over the past few years. This is not the first time that something like this has happened. And we need to have these movements feeding in to our Labour Party. We are meant to be a membership-led party, but if the membership move away, and if the membership that have been made up by people like you turn away, then the policies turn away. The only reason why we were able to have the socialist policies and have, and let's be frank, it was socialists in the Labour Party that elected the current leader, just as they elected the leader before. They were all people who believe in the things that we are talking about today. And I would say that it's our Labour Party. You talk about not having representatives, but when people leave, I just spoke about Ian Byrne, one of my fantastic colleagues up in Liverpool. When socialists leave the party, MPs like him who are doing fantastic work are under threat. That isn't right. You need representatives that represent you. You need policies that represent you. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you reclaim your place in the Labour Party, if you stay and if you fight and if you make sure that we have the socialist party that we deserve. Because when Labour win in this country, and when socialism wins, ultimately the people of this country win. Thank you.